Chapter 5. Murray Hill Place, the new Opus Dei World Headquarters and Conference Center, is located at 243 Lexington Avenue in New York City. With a price tag of just over $47 million, the 133,000 square foot tower is clad in red brick and Indiana limestone. Designed by May and Pinska, the building contains over 100 bedrooms, 6 dining rooms, libraries, living rooms, meeting rooms, and offices. The 2nd, 8th, and 16th floors contain chapels, ornamented with millwork and marble. The 17th floor is entirely residential. Men enter the building through the main doors on Lexington Avenue. Women enter through a side street and are acoustically and visually separated from the men at all times within the building. Earlier this evening, within the sanctuary of his penthouse apartment, Bishop Manuel Aringarosa had packed a small travel bag and dressed in a traditional black cassock. Normally, he would have wrapped a purple cincture around his waist, but tonight he would be traveling among the public, and he preferred not to draw attention to his high office. Only those with a keen eye would notice his 14-karat gold bishop's ring with purple amethyst, large diamonds, and hand-tooled mitre crozier applique. Throwing the travel bag over his shoulder, he said a silent prayer and left his apartment, descending to the lobby where his driver was waiting to take him to the airport. Now, sitting aboard a commercial airliner bound for Rome, Aringarosa gazed out the window at the dark Atlantic. The sun had already set, but Aringarosa knew his own star was on the rise. Tonight the battle will be won, he thought, amazed that only months ago he had felt powerless against the hands that threatened to destroy his empire. As President General of Opus Dei, Bishop Aringarosa had spent the last decade of his life spreading the message of God's work, literally, Opus Dei. The congregation, founded in 1928 by the Spanish priest José María Escrivá, promoted a return to conservative Catholic values and encouraged its members to make sweeping sacrifices in their own lives in order to do the work of God. Opus Dei's traditionalist philosophy initially had taken root in Spain before Franco's regime, but with the 1934 publication of José María Escrivá's spiritual book The Way, 999 Points of Meditation for Doing God's Work in One's Own Life, Escrivá's message exploded across the world. Now, with over 4 million copies of The Way in circulation in 42 languages, Opus Dei was a global force. Its residence halls, teaching centers, and even universities could be found in almost every major metropolis on Earth. Opus Dei was the fastest growing and most financially secure Catholic organization in the world. Unfortunately, Aringarosa had learned, in an age of religious cynicism, cults, and televangelists, Opus Dei's escalating wealth and power was a magnet for suspicion. Many call Opus Dei a brainwashing cult, reporters often challenged. Others call you an ultra-conservative Christian secret society. Which are you? Opus Dei is neither, the bishop would patiently reply. We are a Catholic church. We are a congregation of Catholics who have chosen as our priority to follow Catholic doctrine as rigorously as we can in our own daily lives. Does God's work necessarily include vows of chastity, tithing, and atonement for sins through self-flagellation and the Silas? You are describing only a small portion of the Opus Dei population, Aringarosa said. There are many levels of involvement. Thousands of Opus Dei members are married, have families, and do God's work in their own communities. Others choose lives of asceticism within our cloistered residence halls. These choices are personal, but everyone in Opus Dei shares the goal of bettering the world by doing the work of God. Surely this is an admirable quest. Reason seldom worked, though. The media always gravitated toward scandal, and Opus Dei, like most large organizations, had within its membership a few misguided souls who cast a shadow over the entire group. 2 months ago, an Opus Dei group at a Midwestern university had been caught drugging new recruits with mescaline in an effort to induce a euphoric state that neophytes would perceive as a religious experience. Another university student had used his barbed Silas belt more often than the recommended 2 hours a day and had given himself a near-lethal infection. In Boston not long ago, a disillusioned young investment banker had signed over his entire life savings to Opus Dei before attempting suicide. Misguided sheep, Aringarosa thought, his heart going out to them. Of course, the ultimate embarrassment had been the widely publicized trial of FBI spy Robert Hansen, who, in addition to being a prominent member of Opus Dei, had turned out to be a sexual deviant, his trial uncovering evidence that he had rigged hidden video cameras in his own bedroom so his friends could watch him having sex with his wife. Hardly the pastime of a devout Catholic, the judge had noted. Sadly, all of these events had helped spawn the new watch group known as the Opus Dei Awareness Network, ODAN. The group's popular website, www.odan.org, relayed frightening stories from former Opus Dei members who warned of the dangers of joining. The media was now referring to Opus Dei as God's mafia and the cult of Christ. We fear what we do not understand, Aringarosa thought, wondering if these critics had any idea how many lives Opus Dei had enriched. The group enjoyed the full endorsement and blessing of the Vatican. Opus Dei is a personal prelature of the Pope himself. Recently, however, Opus Dei had found itself threatened by a force infinitely more powerful than the media. An unexpected foe from which Aringarosa could not possibly hide. 5 months ago, the kaleidoscope of power had been shaken, and Aringarosa was still reeling from the blow. They know not the war they have begun, Aringarosa whispered to himself, staring out the plane's window at the darkness of the ocean below. For an instant, his eyes refocused, lingering on the reflection of his awkward face, dark and oblong, dominated by a flat, crooked nose that had been shattered by a fist in Spain when he was a young missionary. The physical flaw barely registered now. Aringarosa's was a world of the soul, not of the flesh. As the jet passed over the coast of Portugal, the cell phone in Aringarosa's cassock began vibrating in silent ring mode. Despite airline regulations prohibiting the use of cell phones during flights, Aringarosa knew this was a call he could not miss. Only one man possessed this number, the man who had mailed Aringarosa the phone. Excited, the bishop answered quietly. Yes? Silas has located the keystone, the caller said. It is in Paris. Within the Church of Saint-Sulpice. Bishop Aringarosa smiled. Then we are close. We can obtain it immediately. But we need your influence. Of course. Tell me what to do. When Aringarosa switched off the phone, his heart was pounding. He gazed once again into the void of night, feeling dwarfed by the events he had put into motion. 500 miles away, the albino named Silas stood over a small basin of water and dabbed the blood from his back, watching the patterns of red spinning in the water. Purge me with hyssop and I shall be clean, he prayed, quoting Psalms. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Silas was feeling an aroused anticipation that he had not felt since his previous life. It both surprised and electrified him. For the last decade, he had been following the way, cleansing himself of sins, rebuilding his life, erasing the violence in his past. Tonight, however, it had all come rushing back. The hatred he had fought so hard to bury had been summoned. He had been startled how quickly his past had resurfaced. And with it, of course, had come his skills. Rusty but serviceable. Jesus' message is one of peace, of non-violence, of love. This was the message Silas had been taught from the beginning, and the message he held in his heart. And yet this was the message the enemies of Christ now threaten to destroy. Those who threaten God with force will be met with force. Immovable and steadfast. For 2 millennia, Christian soldiers had defended their faith against those who tried to displace it. Tonight, Silas had been called to battle. Drying his wounds, he donned his ankle-length, hooded robe. It was plain, made of dark wool, accentuating the whiteness of his skin and hair. Tightening the rope tie around his waist, he raised the hood over his head and allowed his red eyes to admire his reflection in the mirror. The wheels are in motion. Chapter 7. The modest dwelling within the Church of Saint-Sulpice was located on the second floor of the church itself, to the left of the choir balcony. A 2-room suite with a stone floor and minimal furnishings, it had been home to Sister Sandrine Bael for over a decade. The nearby convent was her formal residence, if anyone asked, but she preferred the quiet of the church and had made herself quite comfortable upstairs with a bed, phone, and hot plate. As the church's conservatress d'affaires, Sister Sandrine was responsible for overseeing all non-religious aspects of church operations, general maintenance, hiring support staff and guides, securing the building after hours, and ordering supplies like communion wine and wafers. Tonight, asleep in her small bed, she awoke to the shrill of her telephone. Tiredly, she lifted the receiver. Sir Sandrine. Église Saint-Sulpice. Hello, sister, the man said in French. Sister Sandrine sat up. What time is it? Although she recognized her boss's voice, in 15 years she had never been awoken by him. The abbé was a deeply pious man who went home to bed immediately after Mass. I apologize if I have awoken you, sister, the abbé said, his own voice sounding groggy and on edge. I have a favor to ask of you. I just received a call from an influential American bishop. Perhaps you know him? Manuel Aringarosa? The head of Opus Dei? Of course I know of him. Who in the church doesn't? Aringarosa's conservative prelature had grown powerful in recent years. Their ascension to grace was jump-started in 1982 when Pope John Paul II unexpectedly elevated them to a personal prelature of the Pope, officially sanctioning all of their practices. Suspiciously, Opus Dei's elevation occurred the same year the wealthy sect allegedly had transferred almost $1 billion into the Vatican's Institute for Religious Works, commonly known as the Vatican Bank, bailing it out of an embarrassing bankruptcy. In a second maneuver that raised eyebrows, the Pope placed the founder of Opus Dei on the fast track for sainthood, accelerating an often century-long waiting period for canonization to a mere 20 years. Sister Sandrine could not help but feel that Opus Dei's good standing in Rome was suspect, but one did not argue with the Holy See. Bishop Aringarosa called to ask me a favor, the abbé told her, his voice nervous. One of his numeraries is in Paris tonight. As Sister Sandrine listened to the odd request, she felt a deepening confusion. I'm sorry, you say this visiting Opus Dei numerary cannot wait until morning? I'm afraid not. His plane leaves very early. He has always dreamed of seeing Saint-Sulpice. But the church is far more interesting by day. The sun's rays through the oculus, the graduated shadows on the gnomon, this is what makes Saint-Sulpice unique. Sister, I agree, and yet I would consider it a personal favor if you could let him in tonight. He can be there at, say 1 o'clock? That's in 20 minutes. Sister Sandrine frowned. Of course. It would be my pleasure. The abbé thanked her and hung up. Puzzled, Sister Sandrine remained a moment in the warmth of her bed, trying to shake off the cobwebs of sleep. Her 60-year-old body did not awake as fast as it used to, although tonight's phone call had certainly roused her senses. Opus Dei had always made her uneasy. Beyond the prelate's adherence to the arcane ritual of corporal mortification, their views on women were medieval at best. She had been shocked to learn that female numeraries were forced to clean the men's residence halls for no pay while the men were at Mass, women slept on hardwood floors, while the men had straw mats, and women were forced to endure additional requirements of corporal mortification. All as added penance for original sin. It seemed Eve's bite from the apple of knowledge was a debt women were doomed to pay for eternity. Sadly, while most of the Catholic Church was gradually moving in the right direction with respect to women's rights, Opus Dei threatened to reverse the progress. Even so, Sister Sandrine had her orders. Swinging her legs off the bed, she stood slowly, chilled by the cold stone on the soles of her bare feet. As the chill rose through her flesh, she felt an unexpected apprehension. Women's intuition? A follower of God, Sister Sandrine had learned to find peace in the calming voices of her own soul. Tonight, however, those voices were as silent as the empty church around her.